So welcome everyone and good morning from California. I'm Father John Deere, and happy to be here with you. This is the Beatitude Center for the Nonviolent Jesus, and we're going to reflect today on living into total nonviolence, living into holistic nonviolence. And so just a few basic reminders. Please mute yourselves and type in any questions or comments in the chat space. Ruth Ann is the co-host, so if you have any technical difficulties, you can email her or write to her in the chat or call her. We'll probably go for about an hour and a half, and in a day or two, maybe even Monday, I will go ahead or Ruth Ann, somebody will go ahead and send you a recording link if you want to watch this again. So hold it one second. I'm just still poking around here. Okay, so let's begin with a little prayer. So I invite you, if you want to just take a deep breath and relax and notice how you're feeling this morning, and take a deep breath. And let's all enter into the presence of the God of peace who loves each one of you, each one of us infinitely. Let's welcome the risen nonviolent Jesus here into our hearts and our circle. Take a moment in silence to ask for whatever grace we need, that we might be his disciples and students and apostles of nonviolence. God of peace, thank you for all the blessings of life and love and peace that you give us and the whole human race. Be with us today as we reflect on your way of nonviolence, that we each might live more and more into your total nonviolence, into universal love, universal compassion, universal peace, into your reign of eternal nonviolence, that we might do our little part to spread your reign of universal love and universal peace and nonviolence far and wide. We ask this mighty blessing in the name of the nonviolent Jesus. Amen. So welcome again, everyone. And I was saying beforehand, it's really good to be talking about nonviolence on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, especially with all the propaganda that I think for violence that's being stirred up around it. For me, 9/11 is all about the downward cycle of violence. It's an image of how humanity is stuck in an insane culture of total violence, because it goes back so far, certainly to the first Iraq War. As some of you know, I was supposed to be having breakfast with my parents in the first tower. We had reservations for 9 o'clock. And 2 days before, my parents changed their mind and we went to another hotel, rooftop in New York City. And they left town and I went down and started volunteering, and then very quickly the Red Cross asked me to coordinate all the chaplains at the family center. And I worked 1 day a week at Ground Zero. So I worked 7 days a week for 3 months at Ground Zero and at the family center. Had 600 chaplains, and we ministered to 50,000 direct relatives. So I moved to New Mexico after that, and I'm still recovering. So we're invited to nonviolence, and from Jesus to Dr. King, to choose nonviolence as a way of life, to practice nonviolence, and work for a new world of nonviolence. And, 9/11 shows the futility of violence, because it just leads to further wars and disasters, as we all know. So this is really great that we're going to be together, and I just invite you to relax, enjoy our time together. Many of you have heard me talk about these things before, so I hope this is helpful or at least encouraging. And I think many of you are way farther ahead than me on the journey of nonviolence, but basically we can never talk about it enough. My goal is just to reflect with you together on how we can all become more nonviolent and help as many people as possible become nonviolent. So for us, I invite us today to think about stretching ourselves. how can we move deeper into total nonviolence? And it's different for each one of us. Where do you need to do your work to deepen into nonviolence of Jesus? So only you know, let's say, where the residue of violence is lingering in you, say, whether it's anger or resentment, let's say, or also passivity or complicity with the culture of violence. And I think it's the most important thing we can do with our lives is trying to deepen into nonviolence and to try to spread it far and wide. Dorothy Day, you may have seen that quote that I discovered in her diary, so I'm going to read it. This is Dorothy Day wrote this in 1967, one sentence. To me, nonviolence is the all-important virtue to be nourished and studied and cultivated. And I'm reminded of Gandhi's great sentence that he said, nonviolence is the highest state of consciousness. Wow. So that's the ideal, he said. And so just for the record, I am not an expert on nonviolence. Really, I'm an expert on violence. I'm a violent person trying to become nonviolent, like I'm a Catholic trying to become a Christian. But I see myself like doing this work as your coach, because I've had many, many coaches of nonviolence in my life, because nonviolence is very hard for me. And I've been saying it a long time, and I need a lot of coaching and a lot of help. I'm happy to try to be your coach too. And I want to encourage you to coach others in the wisdom and methodology of nonviolence. It's just like going to the gym. You got to do your exercises and your stretches every day. And it's good to get a personal trainer once in a while to whip you into shape. And that's why I'm here. I thought that was funny, but maybe not. Okay, because we all need to keep studying and practicing and exercising nonviolence. If we want to move out of the culture of violence and into God's reign of nonviolence. So all of this is based on this book, which you've all seen, called The Nonviolent Life. And it's basically, having talked about this for so long, I was trying to figure out a way how to put nonviolence in a simple, easy format. So I came up with these 3 simultaneous attributes. And you got to do all 3. Really be nonviolent to yourselves. At the same time, be meticulously nonviolent to everyone around us, all people and all creatures and all creation. And at the same time, actively participating in the grassroots movements of nonviolence for justice and peace and disarmament and environmental sustainability and so forth. So the catch is that we can't just do one of those. We have to do all 3. And we're usually good at just one of those, maybe 2 of those. But few people in my experience manage all 3. And that's where you get to the Gandhi level and Dr. King level. So my question for you today is, where do you need to deepen in nonviolence? How can you deepen in nonviolence in each of these 3 attributes so that you can live more into holistic, total nonviolence? How does that sound like a game plan? So my plan was to go through each of the 3 points, and some of you got the book and you've heard all this before. But of course, I woke up last week at 4 a.m. and said, no, I got other things I have to say. And I came up with a list of 10 points about nonviolence that I made up last week. So I can't resist. Here goes. And then we'll talk about the 3 points, and I'll go for 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have conversation and question. Okay? So feel free to type in any comments or questions in the chat as we're going along here. But here's my, I'm calling these like 10 basic assumptions for living into nonviolence. And as I was thinking about this, as I said, it came to me in the middle of the night to say all this. And you probably heard me say it before, but it's encouraging. I'm encouraging myself when I talk about all this. 1, nonviolence has a specific vision of life, that we are all one with all humanity, all creatures, all creation, and God. We are all one, which means we're already reconciled, all children of the God of peace, all sisters and brothers of one another, and that we're actually already united. And that's the vision of life that we live in from now on. Gandhi said this is the basis of nonviolence. And with this vision, nonviolence in life makes a lot of sense. But without the vision, we're doomed to violence. That's why vision is so important. Second, because of the truth and vision about the basic unity of all life, all humanity, all creation, and because we're trying to live out of that vision every single day, we can never hurt anybody ever again, or be silent in the face of so many killings and war and destruction. So it's an active life of love that's pursuing this truth of our common unity, trying to stop the violence, stop the killing, stop the wars and preparations for wars as best we can, and train one another in the nonviolent alternative. So the commandment is, as the Buddhists say, do no harm. For us, that I like Dan Berrigan's translation. There is no cause, however noble, for which we will ever again support the taking of a single human life. You want to go farther than that? In nonviolence, we prefer to accept suffering rather than inflict suffering on others in the struggle for justice. We refuse to retaliate, and we work not to even have a trace of the desire for retaliation in the face of violence. Things like that. Third, nonviolence is a way of life, and that's what we're talking about. I always say that it's like we're living in a zombie movie. It's an insane world of violence. It doesn't need to be this way. And you and I are trying to help everyone be sane and whole. So nonviolence is a full-time commitment, spirituality, a path, a vision. I'm always reading Gandhi, and he's always talking about this. It takes full effort. Those were his words. You're ever vigilant, he said. It involves every aspect of our lives. And so throughout our lives, the journey of our life, and that's kind of why I hope today is helpful, the point for us is we're always deepening in nonviolence and doing our part to end the cycle, the downward cycle of violence. And so theoretically, our lives become a model of nonviolence for others. 4, nonviolence is a new kind of sobriety. So if violence is an addiction and we're addicted to violence, then we need to use the 12-step model and become sober people of nonviolence, which means we have to do our work every day from now on. We need a community, a peace group, a Zoom group, a group like this, which is like Violence Anonymous. Hi, I'm John, I'm addicted to violence, and we try to make restitution and apologize and make amends and go forth and live a sober life of nonviolence and try to help everybody else become nonviolent. And the word that I've been sitting with the last year or two is boundaries. We need to live within the boundaries of nonviolence. It's like the drug addict who can't take drugs anymore. And the life for the drug addict is a life within the boundaries of no drugs. We can't be violent anymore in thought, word, or deed. So for a question, what are the boundaries of nonviolence for you personally and for the human family? 5th, nonviolence requires faith in the living God of peace and nonviolence. Now, a lot of people might not agree with that, but I've decided to say, yes, I do believe that. In the 12-step model, for example, we need a higher power, our higher power. So maybe it's just language, however we name God. But Gandhi said, and I agree, that nonviolence requires faith in God. And the more I've thought about that, the way I put that is, to be violent, you don't need God. Because you've got guns, you've got money, you've got weapons, you've got America, which is supposedly protecting you with your nuclear weapons, although they can't protect at all on 9/11, But if you're nonviolent, it means you're going to be unarmed, vulnerable, peaceful your whole life. And so you need God, and you need the community of nonviolence to help you. But God The God of nonviolence is your rock and security. I like that. 6, nonviolence means a life of prayer, meditation, and contemplation. And if you look at Gandhi's life, he lived to be 79. That increased his entire life. So we want to spend more time with our higher power, our creator, God of universal love, or I'm a Christian with the nonviolent Jesus, and breathing in the Holy Spirit of nonviolence and universal love. But I think daily quiet meditation is critical if we want to deepen in nonviolence within and in our lives, or even just to maintain a basic bottom line kind of basic nonviolence. I don't think you can practice nonviolence without daily meditation. And in the last 30 years of his life, Gandhi was doing an hour of meditation every morning and an hour every evening. And just for the record, as I always joke, he was a very busy guy. He was running a revolution. And the old teaching is the busier you are, and whenever things are really falling apart and you're having a really hard time, you double your amount in prayer. You spend even more time in prayer. You can never spend enough time in prayer and meditation if we're going to be instruments of the God of peace and nonviolence. 7, nonviolence means mindfulness, as Thich Nhat Hanh teaches, that we try to stay as centered as we can every day, every hour, every moment in the eternal present moment of peace, which means we're always trying to live in peace. And we're not going to get tossed one way or the other. Thich Nhat Hanh has a nice sense. If you want peace, peace is available immediately. It's here right now. And the trick is to be able to live in, dare I say, perfect peace, or with the God of peace. The way I like is with Jesus all the time. We're practicing this life and living this life so that when in worst case scenarios, we're not tossed, we can remain calm no matter what, because we're so centered in mindfulness of peace. Now, that's why I've always defined nonviolence as remembering. I hope this isn't getting too off track, but remembering who we are, because violence is forgetting. Violence is forgetfulness. It's mindlessness, the chaos of the monkey mind, as the Buddhists call it. But we put on the mind of the nonviolent Jesus, or we try to remember, we try to stay mindful. We remember that we are the sons and daughters of the God of peace and universal love. So that's just the way we are. 8, nonviolence is about living an active, engaged solidarity with the whole human family and all of creation. It's not further narcissism or some highfalutin selfishness or bourgeois egocentricity, or for that matter, passivity or cowardice or sitting under a tree and doing nothing. You read Gandhi, his big concern was what he called cowardice. And he talked a lot about the difference between the nonviolence of the weak versus the nonviolence of the brave. You and I want to have the nonviolence of the brave. And we're going to get out into the culture of violence and do our bit to disarm folks in the world. The focus is on the whole human family and all of humanity. That means our focus is on suffering humanity and the suffering creatures and suffering Mother Earth. We want to get out of ourselves and put ourselves at the service of healing, disarming, and transforming humanity and Mother Earth, things like that. Number 9, nonviolence is eschatological. I'm trying to impress you and it's not working. That's a big theology word, which I like. It means, the end times or the beginning of eternity. Apocalyptic fundamentalist teaching is the end of the world is going to come in total violence. Actually, the coming of the reign of God on earth would be total nonviolence, if you see. So our daily practice of nonviolence and trying to deepen into nonviolence means we are trying to live full time right now, every moment to the minute we die, in the reign of God, in God's reign of universal nonviolence, which Gandhi defined as nonviolence. And it's available if you want it. This is all language, but the eternal present moment of peace right now is the presence of God, and it's available, and we can step into it, into universal love, universal compassion, universal peace. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't have taught us these things. This is doable. Eschatological nonviolence means we are trying not to be stuck any longer in this culture of violence, but trying to live as if we are citizens of God's reign of nonviolence. And that means that eternity has already begun. We're not waiting till when we die, if you're with me. Eternal life has begun now, and so we're getting ready for heaven by practicing nonviolence, because in heaven, it's total nonviolence, things like that. 10, my last point. I think, and this is all such basic and obvious stuff, but through the lens of nonviolence, life makes sense. God makes sense. The gospel makes sense. That's why I keep harping away at this, because the words love and peace don't really work for me, even though nonviolence is about love and truth and peace. But everybody's for love and peace, and we go on killing each other or doing nothing about the killing. But with this clumsy word nonviolence, you go, oh, Jesus was totally nonviolent. And he's announcing that God is totally nonviolent. Well, if you do the math, if God is totally nonviolent, God has to give us free will. God cannot control us, which means we have to be free to reject God and God's nonviolence. And we think it's freedom, free to hurt and kill others. But the real freedom comes from the boundaries of nonviolence. But if you do the math there, God is then in eternal suffering, nonviolent love. God is always on the cross, and the God of peace is wanting so much for humanity to enter God's reign of nonviolence and join his campaign to get every human being to practice nonviolence. And then in the end, I'm just talking about how nonviolence makes sense to me. I think in the end, to be human is to be nonviolent. And the spiritual life is, nonviolence. We're headed toward a new realm of nonviolence, and it means it's a way to understand faith. So those are my 10 pre-notes. I don't know if they're helpful, but I want to look at the 3 attributes now, if you're still here with me. And I guess, especially on this anniversary, I'm just poking around here at the Zoom screen to see that everyone is still there. As the world's violence worsens, our nonviolence has to deepen. And frankly, I think everything we are doing as we try to deepen nonviolence is preparation. Daniel Berrigan told me that in the early 1980s. He said everything we're doing for peace and justice is preparation for what's to come, which is going to be worse, in the sense that there's so much violence upon violence upon violence that we see it now with catastrophic climate change. Things are going to be getting worse. And you and I are preparing ourselves and trying, and I really urge you to try to prepare and teach nonviolence to as many as we can. Because as things worsen, we want the culture of violence to fall or disappear non-violently. It's headed toward even further disaster. The empire can fall violently, or it can be disarmed non-violently through the movement, things like that. Jesus calls us to total holistic nonviolence. I'm paraphrasing St. Paul here. The height and breadth and length and width of nonviolence as universal love, universal compassion, universal peace, which means non-cooperating with every trace of violence within us and in our culture, and then trying to give our lives as best we can in our own small ways to not just resisting systemic violence, but working for a new culture of nonviolence. And we can all do that in a million different ways. So I want to talk about these three attributes. There you go. The first, there's really not 1, 2, 3. They're all simultaneous. So let's look at nonviolence toward ourselves. So nonviolence toward ourselves, nonviolence toward everyone, and being part of the movement. Nonviolence toward ourselves. When I think about that, I'm talking about every human being is raised in a culture of violence. All of us have been touched by violence. All of us are complicit in the culture of violence, such as in racism or sexism or classism or greed or war. We're all complicit somehow or other. So we've all been taught to be violent and trained to be violent toward others and toward ourselves to varying degrees. Some of us were victims of violence right from the get-go, from the violence of our parents. But as I said, I think we're all deeply wounded victims of violence in one way or the other. And Henry Nouwen put it very beautifully. So if we're all wounded by violence, we have a choice. We're going to be wounded wounders or wounded healers. You and I want to be wounded healers. And to go forth and be a force of healing and nonviolence in the world, we are still tending to our wounds, right? That we're mindful about, oh, I'm not perfect, I'm flawed, and if I'm not careful, my violence will be triggered. That's where I'm going with this. Whatever we do, we don't want to spread violence or be violent. And so we want to deal with our violence and our wounds and cultivate interior nonviolence. And I'm not even, I don't even know what that means. I made up that phrase, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. To be nonviolent to ourselves, which would first mean non-cooperating with our inner violence, our violence toward ourselves. So what does that mean? And again, everybody is different, but this is a very particular problem, according to the Dalai Lama, for people in the United States, where there's so little love, where we're the most violent country in the world and in the history of the world. So we are so recently he said, we're all totally brainwashed in nonviolence. He said that last month. So when you look inside and you see your violence, you want to beat yourself up. So right there, we want to break the cycle of violence. We try not to beat ourselves up or put ourselves down or nurture violence or play negative tapes about ourselves in our mind, about how bad we are, things like whatever it is. Instead, we want to affirm ourselves, be kind to ourselves, give ourselves a break, make peace with ourselves, make friends with ourselves, and create a place of peace within where the God of peace can dwell. I remember some of you were with Pache Benny and me in Assisi, and we talked a lot about this, that nonviolence to ourselves means being gentle with ourselves, which means practicing self-care and self-compassion. There's a monk friend of mine who says self-care is the new asceticism. You know, it's the opposite of the way they used to do it hundreds of years ago. But as activists, the people who are going to be involved in the culture of violence, you and I have to be really especially working on the interior nonviolence, really as mindful and as nonviolent as we can, because we're going to go out there and we're going to try to speak up and speak out and take a stand and engage our opponents, and we have to be on our game. So we're training all the time. You know, that's why Dr. King spoke of militant nonviolence, or Gandhi spoke about, in effect, we're like an army of nonviolence satyagrahis. We're really trained. We're like the Marines of nonviolence. I don't know if any of that imagery works, but you see what I'm saying? That's the level that Gandhi and King want of us. And I'm saying, well, what do you think? If we are not really on our game all the time, when the moment happens and we're out in the streets or engaging someone and provoked, or worse, threatened, our lingering inner violence can be triggered. And we might respond with violence, and we don't want that. So we're always working on inner violence and practicing daily meditation, mindfulness, self-reflection, cultivate inner peace and deepen our nonviolence so that we can be better public peacemakers. And now, just to reflect on that, if you're hanging in here with me, because we're addicted to violence, we need our higher power. And that's why we take time throughout our day to be with God. But the God of Jesus is a God who's just crazy about us, wildly in love with us. I love you so much, and we never want to be with God. You know, and it's not a problem or an obligation. It's nice to be with someone who loves you a billion times more than you can imagine. And so a part of interior nonviolence is going and being with a God who loves you and letting God love you. Because then we get healed and disarmed, and a little bit of godly nonviolence rubs off on us. And God gives us God's peace, which is the resurrection gift of Jesus. And then we can go forth into the culture of violence, and we're ready for anything. We can be totally nonviolent. So we can always go very, very deep into meditation and inner nonviolence. Remember, this is only one of the attributes. But so the trap of the Buddhists say bourgeois Americans is that we just do our inner work. And that's not what I'm saying. We have to also be doing toward every human being and part of the movement. But in this part, the inner work, there's work to be done. We have to forgive ourselves, accept our brokenness and our weakness, claim ourselves as broken but beloved at the same time, broken but beloved by God, and claim our true identities as the sons and daughters of the God. And Ken Budigan always talks about living in the light. I like that, and Daniel Berrigan did too. So God is nonviolent to us and loves us. So we respect God. So we are going to try to be nonviolent to ourselves and love ourselves. If you see the math there, I'm continuing to reflect on inner nonviolence. So I'm basically recommending for this daily meditation, gospel reading, sacraments, quiet time, taking care of yourself, mindfulness walks, whatever you need to do. See a spiritual director. If it's serious, see a therapist. Pema Chodron, I think, is the greatest teacher right now, offering great Buddhist insights on dealing with your inner life and your emotions and nurturing the emotional life of nonviolence. I think in light of catastrophic climate change, daily mindfulness walks in nature are really healing and disarming and help your inner nonviolence. So creation is part of it. Okay, the second attribute, which is not a second, but it's just a different one. Nonviolence toward all people, all creatures, and all creation. So I'm just glancing here to see if the Zoom is still working. It seems to be working. Okay. So we're doing inner nonviolence. At the same time, we want to deepen our interpersonal nonviolence. The goal, the ideal, and I know this is still kindergarten level, but I'm your coach, so I'm encouraging you as I'm trying to encourage myself to practice meticulous nonviolence toward every human being we meet, every human being on the planet, which means our families, our children, our parents, our neighbors, our coworkers, everyone in the local community, everyone in your local church, with an attitude of nonviolence toward every human being on the planet. We try not to hurt anyone, but to live and speak and act publicly within the boundaries of nonviolence. That means we have to, what we're doing interiorly, we're doing publicly. We forgive everyone who ever hurt us. We're dropping all our resentments, our grudges, letting go of anger, any sense of vengeance. Gandhi said you have to practice fearlessness, let go of your fears, because we're moving into love. So Love will transform all that. And we are going to practice loving kindness toward everybody. I like the idea of trying to outdo one another in loving kindness. And the great peacemakers that I've known really did that. And as I watched them get older, they went deeper in that. It was kind of amazing. Like, I'm thinking of a lot of my great friends. And what we're trying to do is to widen the circle of our friends around us into the beloved community, as Dr. King called it. So if we can deepen, if it's possible, in interpersonal nonviolence, I think our hearts will break. And that means break open and widen. Like the Grinch who stole Christmas, remember, at the end, his heart breaks open. And we widen into universal love and universal compassion and universal peace, which is universal active solidarity with the whole human family and all of creation. That's where we're headed. So nonviolence toward others. So we want to be attentive to those who push our buttons, those who provoke us, those who rub us the wrong way, those who annoy us. Now, for some curmudgeons like me, that can be everybody. No. You really are always reflecting on, okay, why do I feel this way to this person? Why did I say that thing to that person? Why did I act that way to this person? Kind of to reflect on what's going on. Thich Nhat Hanh says, just look deeply within to explore how you are acting with people and how you can be more nonviolent and more kind, loving and kind. So there's a lot of strategies here, and they're different for everybody. And you have to pick your own because you're you. You know, each one of us is unique to find out what works for us to be my best self, to be as loving as I can be and nonviolent toward every human being. So for some people, sometimes it means quiet and listening. I'm talking about when you're with difficult people, or giving people a space, or affirming them, or really learning nonviolent communication and being able to say, what I hear you saying is that you are very upset about this. People often need to be acknowledged of what they're saying. Thich Nhat Hanh, on the other hand, has a very powerful teaching, which has helped me a lot. You know, this is for difficult situations, difficult families. And someone was saying to him, well, I've been trying so hard to do this, and I can't change them. And he said, that's the wrong approach. First is to be, second is to do. And I'm just reflecting here with you, just giving you various strategies. First, we always want to be solid in our nonviolence and centered and mindfulness and eternal present moment of peace. And then we reach out. So when we're talking with people and acting with people, we don't want to be tossed either way. You see, and we don't want to be triggered. Pema Chodron calls it biting the hook. We don't want to take the hook like a fish and, which we all do. And we can easily bite the hook, but we're on our game. So I like that to be really solid. So for example, in terms of how I act, I have found over the years that if I get tired and I'm in crowds, then I start down the slippery slope. I can get short-tempered or gruff or mean because I travel so much, and that means airports. And so I made that a school of teaching me about nonviolence. I have to be on my guard. This is just my neurotic behavior, and to be on my guard and to work on that and to keep breathing and to rest and to let go. Talking about trying to really understand ourselves and our emotions and our moods so that we can be nonviolent, especially in difficult situations or with difficult people or those who push our buttons. And as I've always said, as I wrote in the book, it's very strange because, and this is what Henry Nouwen said, that the people we find difficult are our teachers of nonviolence because they expose the lingering violence within us and they show us where we need to deepen. So whoever is the few difficult people in your life, They're your teachers. Now you have a chance to go and experiment with nonviolence with them. And that can be a great, great blessing. Now, I always say the greatest teacher of this in Catholic history is Saint Therese of Lisieux, who's called the Little Flower, but was a really great, great teacher of nonviolence. She called it the little way of merciful love. And she's in the monastery, and there was this one elderly nun that everybody hated, mean, nasty, grouchy. And Therese just said, okay, my whole life's work is I'm going to win this person over with love and smile at her. And she did. And as that elderly nun died, she said to Therese, you're the only person who likes me, the only person who's been kind to me my whole life. And that's what I'm talking about here. You know, you can see that in her autobiography. So we want to pray over and journal and train ourselves to experiment with nonviolence with everyone and let go of whatever it is that is an obstacle within us from moving deeper. But at the same time, as Thich said, Han says, you know, just do what we can. You know, we don't want to overdo it. It's all about deepening in compassion and understanding and patience, moving into God's unconditional love, because this is the way God treats us and the way God deals with us. So we're going to go forth and treat others this way and deal with others that way. So I just invite you today to reflect on right now, at this point in your life, who are the people who trigger you? What are the situations that trigger you? And how can you, where do you need to deepen your nonviolence with those people or those situations? Maybe whether it's driving down the road, or you're with some friends who are big Trump people, or family. So we're trying to be consciously nonviolent. Now the creatures. How can we be more and more nonviolent to the creatures because they're dying by the millions and the species are going extinct? I do think you have to become a vegetarian. So I invite you to reflect on how you can do that, and our attitude towards creatures. And then Mother Earth. How can we be more and more nonviolent to Mother Earth? Well, certainly be involved in the environmental movement, which is all the movements of nonviolence, to stop the fossil fuels and the destruction of the earth. But we're talking about living in greater appreciation and solidarity and awe and wonder for Mother Earth and the beauties of creation. Talking about this in the Psalms workshop about appreciating Mother Earth more and more, which is what the indigenous have been calling us first-class people to be doing for millennia. That's why I say mindfulness walks are really helpful to work on that spiritual oneness with creation. Okay, the last attribute, which is I could have put first, nonviolence as active participation in the global grassroots movements. So we're trying to be nonviolent toward ourselves, and we're trying to be nonviolent toward all people and all creatures and Mother Earth. Great. That's still not enough. You know, we're not hermits here or monks, just in ourselves. I think the Gandhian Kingian nonviolence is an active and Christian nonviolence is active engagement with the culture of violence. Jesus marched to Jerusalem and was executed for his civil disobedience. Gandhi and Dr. King, too, were executed for their nonviolent civil disobedience and resistance. That they set the standard. I'm not saying we have to be martyrs, but I am saying we have to be part of the movement. And that's part of the life of active nonviolence, to join and support the global grassroots movements of nonviolence for justice, social, economic, and racial justice for the world's poor, for disarmament, for environmental sustainability. And otherwise, our nonviolence is not nonviolence, as Gandhi understood it. It's just passivity and complicity with the structures of violence. Now, this is a deep thing with me, but I'm saying if we are not involved in some grassroots movement for disarmament, justice, and creation, we are not pursuing active nonviolence. this, I have here in my notes that not what we don't want to end up is in another type of bourgeois narcissism, where I look at me, I am so peaceful. Baloney. If you are out on the front lines of nonviolence, you're going to be going through a lot of, you're not going to feel peaceful, basically. Now you get to be nonviolent, if you see what I mean. Then you're into real nonviolence, where you get to be calm and peaceful, as Gandhi getting 10 and 15 death threats a day, as Dr. King, all those years getting death threats. And, you know, he had a brick thrown at him, he was stabbed, he was punched in the face several times in front of people, and he always maintained his nonviolence. So it's a very different thing that I'm trying to get at here, and I don't have the words to talk about it, but it means being involved in the movement. You have to go out into the world. And my question for you is, how are you doing with this? What's your involvement in the movement right now? And I'm talking about the global movement, and you can pick any part of the movement if you're involved locally with the homeless, or a local peace group, or the environmental movement. We're working to stop racism, Black Lives Matter, all these are critical. But once you have one foot in the movement, to me, you're involved in the whole global movement. And how can you do it better, more faithfully, more cheerfully, more nonviolently, and while taking care of yourself and being nonviolent to yourself and others at the same time? You see what I mean? Now, some of you have heard me say that I was with Cesar Chavez shortly before he died. And I said to him, well, when I'm with people, I'm talking about nonviolence, and they say, what should we do? What should I say? And Cesar Chavez said to me, tell everybody, public action, public action, public action. He went just like that into this fix. If you're interested in practicing and deepening nonviolence, you have to engage in some public action for justice, disarmament, and creation. Powerful. That's the spiritual teaching. That's another way of describing discipleship to Jesus. And he was saying that nonviolence is a political methodology of social change. And he said, and this is a quote that I have at the beginning of my book, it always works if it's tried. You know, that we strategize and organize a nonviolent movement. It will work. But we all have to be part of the effort. And we all have so many gifts to bring. This is how nonviolent change happens, through bottom-up people power grassroots movement. Now, as the world is in worse situation than ever, on the brink of nuclear war, in catastrophic climate change, poverty the likes of which we've never seen, you know, Congress next month is about to increase the budget for the Pentagon, higher another $40–50 billion, higher than it's ever been in history. Just insane militarism, military spending, that we need to build a global grassroots movement of nonviolence, the likes of which the world has never seen. So everyone needs to be part of it. And that's why I keep harping on this, so forgive me, but we all need to do our part. Every one of us is needed. Every one of us has a gift to bring. Every one of us can be involved until the day we die, and not give up, so that our life nonviolence becomes contagious. It's sort of an opposite of a pandemic of nonviolence. So Cesar was saying that even the most entrenched structure of violence and empire can be worn down through organized grassroots engaged nonviolence. I would add, because nonviolence is the methodology of God. So one of the things Dr. King insisted, and you may have seen my e-blast yesterday, that we're having Jim Lawson come on October 2nd. I hope everybody joins us for that. He's in his 90s now. Dr. King said in 1957, he's the world's greatest teacher of nonviolence. When I brought Jim to Santa Fe, New Mexico to speak in 2015, he stood up and said, Dr. King, on Friday night, he stood up and said, Dr. King defined nonviolence as power. I never heard anybody say that before. And I've read that Dr. King said that. Hearing Jim say it was powerful. No pun intended. Maybe it was empowering, because he was saying, Jim and Dr. King say, we are not powerless. And that's what the culture of violence wants us to think. There's nothing you can do. That is the definition of violence. You're be helpless, you can't do anything. Jesus is totally empowering us. And so is Dr. King. Nonviolence is power, a methodology of personal, social, and global transformation. The trick is just not to get discouraged or to give up or to be despairing. All we have to do is just be faithful to doing our little part and leaving the outcome, the results in God's hands. Now, Erica Chenoweth's famous book, Why Civil Resistance Works, documents how over the last century, every nonviolent movement has been more successful. Every nonviolent revolution has made more lasting, positive, nonviolent good than any violence. It's incredible. We never had this evidence before. It's just social science research that she and our team produced to prove that from Jesus to Cesar Chavez, they were right, nonviolence works. We can never say again, I'm not sure, it doesn't work. So if you haven't done your homework and studied all the great new studies and books and research coming out about nonviolence, that's something you can do. And go and read Erica Chenoweth. It's tough going through it, but it's powerful. And then you can go and teach people about this. So I'm coming to the end. If you're still with me, I hope you're okay. I've been trying to speak about the three simultaneous attributes of nonviolence: being nonviolent to ourselves, being nonviolent toward every human being, every creature on the planet and Mother Earth, and being nonviolent by being part of the global grassroots movement of nonviolence for social justice, disarmament, and environmental sustainability. I'm hoping that some of this was helpful. But my idea was to offer you a broad overview of nonviolence, to look at these three attributes and to invite you to deepen, to look at where you need to do your work and to stretch yourselves. You know, why not? Let's go a little farther on the road of nonviolence. And one of the things I think I said at Kelly and Assisi was always reflect on our journey, where we've been in our life journey, the journey, and to see life as a journey on the road of peace and nonviolence. Where are we now on that road? How far have we come? How far do we have to go? And let's go farther. We can, and we can encourage each other to do that. And everything I've said theoretically was an encouragement. I hope this was encouraging to you. I'm not so sure. Some of you look like you've passed out. Maybe you need to get more coffee or get some food quickly. Oxygen is also very helpful. So I'm looking at the time. We've got 40 minutes or so. If we want to open it up for questions and comments, I'll ask Ruth Ann to help me. But I really want to hear from you. I've talked a long time. Let's create a safe place of compassionate listening. What comments do you have about nonviolence, personally or theoretically, or the world, for me or yourselves, or anything you want to share with the group? Ruth Ann, is there someone we should start with?
Well, let's see. Looking at the chat, everybody got to get their head going here and put something in the chat.
Okay, so I see Lydia raised her hand. Wherever Lydia is, you can unmute yourself and jump in.
Has something. Oh.
I'm here.
Okay, Lydia, we'll start with Lydia, and then did you say Bill Lewis has something?
Yeah.
Okay, Lydia.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Father John. Yes, you're right. Probably you have said this before, but I just want to tell you how appreciative I am of the reminders of what we need to do and not to be a violent person. What I'm seeing is that the inner work is so important, because I just believe that this is just very countercultural, and we really need to be transformed to practice this. So I think that without the inner work, probably we will not do what the vision of nonviolence is. I wonder why is this no teaching education, when we are growing up, right? Actually, I had a discussion with a group earlier, a contemplative group, and we were discussing about our lack of courage of speaking the truth. And one of the things that come up was that, when we're elementary school, and I come from a Catholic school run by nuns, we were taught to be obedient, but obedient not to God, but the authority. So I think we're starting, and with the wrong foot, if we don't encourage that since we are growing up. And also, I would like you to tell me what is your suggestion, any practical suggestions for somebody that has a full-time job. And there is always a tendency to go with the society and, being sucked into do my job and not have time for activities to participate actively in the grassroots that you were mentioning.
Thank you so much, Lydia. That's really great. I heard three things you were saying. The importance of inner work. Yeah. What I keep backpedaling on is that all my life I've heard, I've said, some of you have heard me say, the very first time I gave a public speech in 1984, I think it was at Yale or New Haven, Connecticut, someone stood up and said, well, I'm going to spend the rest of my life being perfectly peaceful. And once I've achieved that, then I'll get involved in your movement. And I think that's heresy. That is not Christianity. That's not peacemaking. And that's not nonviolence. If you read the fine print, Jesus said he was in anguish his whole life. And that's what, so the inner life of nonviolence is wrestling with the suffering in the world and still being nonviolent to yourself. Teresa of Lisieux had beautiful things about bear with the burden of yourself to create a place for the God of peace to dwell in you as you are doing your work of love and peacemaking the world. These are great teachings. Now, the older I get, the more I understand nonviolence. And I keep thinking, well, isn't this going to get easier, my inner junk? No, I'm as worse as I ever was. I feel like, and so I have to do a lot of inner work all the time. And especially if I'm out teaching nonviolence, and I make mistakes all the time. But that's why I like all three. Why no education of nonviolence? This is a critical question because we're just addicted and brainwashed into violence, and we teach one another violence. And that's what's happening this week in the media. Certainly, Catholicism and the Christian church has totally rejected the nonviolence of Jesus, except for a few pockets like the Quakers and some Franciscans, I would say, Michelle. But we taught something else. We taught the church, and you're right, obedience in the church. Those days are over, and Pope Francis has said all of that. What we need now is obedience to the Sermon on the Mount and the gospel of nonviolence and love your enemies. And so we were never taught that. Everything is teaching. Paul Chappell is a young activist whose whole message is that, we teach, people are not born to read. Every human being who can read had to be taught to read. We're in such bad shape now that every human being can be taught to be peaceful and nonviolent. So that's what we have to do, Lydia. Thirdly, practical suggestions. I've met a lot of people, especially in the last year and a half in the pandemic through Zooms and phone counseling, who tell me that they have these full-time jobs. I got 4 kids. I remember someone saying, I have 4 kids and I have this huge job. I'll say some of it. She was a doctor and she worked for the government of a state running healthcare, but she also had a practice and she had 4 kids. And she goes, John, I just can't get deeper into nonviolence. I only have time for 2 hours of meditation a day. I almost fell off my chair. She was telling me how she gets up at 4 o'clock and she's totally with the nonviolent Jesus going through her day. It's making a huge difference in the lives of many people. And that she was tithing her time a little bit to the healthcare movement as part of her global work for nonviolence. Do you see what I mean? So one way, Lydia, to think about as a practical suggestion for busy people is tithing your time to the movement. And I can't tell you what that is. Maybe it's an hour a month. Maybe it's an hour a week. But once a week, you're going to do something either for your local group, or you're going to get on 350.org or Black Lives Matter, find out what's happening, make a contribution, go to a meeting periodically, and if necessary, make some changes in your life. But certainly, I would take your question, Lydia, to God, and I would take your question to some local peacemakers and ask for advice. Now, I saw some hands up. So Bill Lewis, let's go next to Bill. Thanks, Lydia. And you can unmute yourself, Bill, and just go ahead and talk if you're there. If you're still here, Bill from Florida.
There he is.
Still here.
Can you wave, Bill? Because I don't see you.
He's got his screen off.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, speak up, Bill.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just very helpful reminders today about how various elements of my life can fit together and make a more meaningful pattern. I was feeling really discombobulated and scattered. Thank you very much.
Oh, great, Bill. I'm going to call on Tatanka, then Michelle, then Cheryl. Tatanka, this is my friend Chris
Yes,
in the car.
thank you. Yeah, I had a couple things that worked, or that I was reminded were working. I took on two huge things. One was this, anyway, I'm working on global climate change with a group, and I was also working for weeks and weeks on March on Washington, and then a roundtable that we did that is ongoing now. And I knew I was making a choice to put myself into potential overwhelm, okay? But I felt in prayer that that was the right choice. So for 2 weeks' time, it was very, very intense. And I do meditate, and I work with my dreams. I think I have a balance of those three things as well as I can do right now. But I noticed that I've been working on my weight with a 12-step, and I kind of equated my escape into food, which is my only true drug of choice historically. And I'm not eating now, I'm losing weight, all that's fine. But it was that energy of wanting to escape in the moment while I'm doing work. So I just took a breath and said, what is the next right action? And consistently, instead of taking some time to look at a music video to get me inspired or take a quick nap or whatever it was, my work dictated that I needed to stay on the phone. It was constant Zooms, constant phone calls, 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. And one of my teachers and heroes is Dolores Huerta, and that's her schedule, you know. So I also aim to find out how she does that and how she can maintain that. So I would make that next phone call, and what happened was a whole bunch of magical things. The one call just gave me the energy, so I ended up spending like hours and hours and hours and hours in that moment of one call, and then another breath. And can I take a break yet? Well, no, actually, I'm feeling good. I want to go ahead. And it was somehow transformative, because my experience of those 2 weeks working with people on the national and international level, as I was part of this, coordinating steering committee, was I didn't have any perspective of how I was coming across. I just know that I had panic at night, I had to do my self-care, had to make sure I got enough sleep. And at the end of the time, the team of people came together and said, we have a name for you. Now, I had no perspective on this time period. I was just trying to hold on. And they said, you are now, we call you Tatanka Buddha. And I said, really? Yeah, you're that calm in the storm for all of us. I had no idea. I mean, that was not my inner experience. I was just kind of making it through. So I had no, it was a God thing. That's one. The second thing I wanted to share was that prayer. I know prayer works. I'm part of my lineage for in the wilderness with a mystery school with my native teachers. I mean, we worked with the weather. We don't change the weather, but when you're in alignment with natural law and sacred law, amazing things can happen. So with the Tahoe fires, I have a lot of friends in Tahoe, Echo Lake, Angora Lake, South Shore. They all evacuated, and all the weather people were saying as it jumped Highway 50 that last Thursday afternoon and evening, the wind was going to turn north and they were just preparing. So I just went into prayer, nothing more I could do. I woke up in the middle of the night. I had had a dream that I was I was on the shoreline. I was very consciously a part of millions of prayers. I witnessed the coolness. I witnessed gently moving the wind to the east away from, and then prayed for all the creatures and people that might do, because we're trying to save this. But anyway, prayed for everybody involved. It was an amazing dream. Then I woke up, went into meditation, and was right back there again. And then, of course, got on in the morning after the first news accounts, and that's exactly real time where the wind had moved. So I didn't make it happen, but I was part of millions and millions of prayers that got together, and that happened. So the third thing, there were three things. I went to my spiritual teacher, and I tell this to people who are teachers, as we all are here. We're trying to practice the nonviolent Jesus. And I said, well, this is the third time this happened over the last 3 years. People came to me on a certain day and thanked me for something. And all three people had thanked me, and I had been in Monterey, and I had taken them out to coffee, helped them, one with a personal problem, etc. And I'm going, you sure it was me? I mean, I hadn't been in Monterey in a year, okay? And then they said, oh yeah, you know, and what you did with me and my wife, thank you so much. You took us out to coffee. Of course it was you. So instead of saying it wasn't me, I said, okay, you're welcome. And then I went to my teacher. I said, what is this? And what he said is that people who are spiritual teachers, this happens all the time. But if you don't have the mental space to allow it to happen, you don't realize it happens. And then the moment he said, yes, you were in two places at the same time, then I realized my yoga gurus, they're with thousands of dadas and didis around the world every day, right? But they're very, very busy people like Gandhi. They don't have to consciously be there, but they communicate. No, the Kumbh Mela, it's going to be a monsoon, come 3 days later, take this airline, all this stuff, right? Thousands of people. So if my spiritual teachers can communicate with thousands at the same time, you and I can be two places at the same time, you know? And he said, it's important for people to know this. So I'm telling you that the power of prayer and the power of being in alignment with natural law and with our sacred law is unbelievably powerful.
Thank you, Tatanka. That's wonderful. Thank you for all those beautiful reflections. I'm going to ask Michelle now to speak, and then I'll call on Cheryl and then Kelly. Thank you, Tatanka. Loved it. Michelle, good morning.
Hi, John. How are you doing? Great
Good.
to be with you. So, John, I enjoyed what you were saying at the beginning in your 10 points about sort of looking at violence as something we're addicted to, and the 12-step approach and sobriety and nonviolence and so forth. And I was thinking that one of the things that 12-step programs really emphasize are that you can't do this alone. I mean, yes, it should be you and God, but you very much need companions, right? You need a sponsor and you need a community. And because, practicing sobriety, and I think practicing nonviolence is the same thing, is something you're always learning, and it has to be reinforced day by day within a community. So I wanted to get your thoughts on how people can find communities, of nonviolence. And then also, I'm involved in some groups that are forming recently that are trying to be communities of nonviolence. And sometimes there's a bit of a difficult choices to make regarding the inner work and the outer work. Like, do you have any tips for that? Like what's the balance? What's the sequence, especially when groups are forming and so forth?
Michelle, thank you so much. That's so wonderful. We need community to do this. And there's just so much to talk about that, but theoretically, Michelle, the church was supposed to be our community of nonviolence, Every parish should be a community of nonviolence. Every Christian church on the planet. And most of them are communities of violence. You can actually hear preaching, go and let's bless the troops, bless the war. Or you're so angry, you come out of mass or church ready to kill someone, or at least run somebody over in the parking lot. Or you're just in plain mad at the minister or the priest. None of that is working, that's not the goal at all. But I remember, I always think about Dan Berrigan, and as you're talking, I used to talk about this more than I have in decades, but he had about 20 communities, Michelle. He was a Jesuit, which was a big community, and we had a very serious local community. It was as good as Gandhi's ashram. We were together morning, noon, and night, and we really became a nonviolent community of best friends. It got carried away because we went on vacations together, and then we made 8-day retreats together. And this one Jesuit friend of mine said, I want to get away from you people. It was really good, but that was because of Daniel Berrigan. But on top of that, though, he had a couple of other communities, and then he formed, the Plowshares group and this and that, but he formed a little group that met every Tuesday night called Kairos, which is still going in New York City 50 years later. And I was a member for 20 years. And we'd show up every other Tuesday night in a church basement on 94th Street, and 1 hour, did a little prayer, a little scripture, talk about what's happening in the world, and talk about what are we going to do about it. We're usually planning an action. So I learned, first of all, how Dan survived was he had a lot of communities. He had a lot of support. And so I started forming communities. And what I did, Michelle, maybe you know this or not, but in the early 90s, I started Pax Christi groups, and I formed about 50 of them around the country. I formed 35 in the Bay Area over a 4-year period. Most of them are gone now. And the motto was very helpful. Prayer, study, and action. You had to do a little of each of those three. Now, the thinking was I couldn't find a peace group that I liked that was interested in nonviolence. There were affinity groups that were doing civil disobedience, though there really aren't any now. So I had to start them. And in fact, I was starting little Kairos groups. And wow, they were fantastic. So Michelle, you may have to start your own, though with the new, Michelle's a friend of mine, the new work you're going to be doing, that's part of the work you could do is start little, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that, little networks of these communities of nonviolence. Prayer, study, and action was the Pax Christi motto. People are not finding this in their local churches. They may not even find it in their peace and justice group, which is maybe doing really good work, but everybody is, you can't do any spiritual depth as well, which is interesting to both of us. So constantly building community, Michelle, constantly forming community, with your work, you're going to have to be in touch with a lot of different communities. Michelle's about to start a new job. And just keep in mind that the first thing Jesus does is form a community around him. The first thing St. Francis does is form a community. Gandhi always had a community. Is Jesus saying you can't live a life of nonviolence without community? I think that's true. I don't know if that helps, Michelle, but those are some of the thoughts off the top of my head. Nice to see you. Cheryl and then Kelly. Cheryl, if you're still with us, maybe you got a better offer.
I'm here, John, but I have a bad connection, so that's.
Oh yeah, you don't. Yeah, it looks like God is behind your with the light coming through. But go ahead.
I don't know. Maybe God is right there.
Yeah.
So, this is kind of like what I was going to say. I've been an activist my whole life, but lately I haven't been able to find kind of the right place to go further with what I want to be and do. And in the past, I've just started groups that I thought would be what I wanted. And I said, I think that really is, even if you can't start a group or don't want to make a model, think of it. Think of what would be the perfect group for you. And then find the closest you can get to that. If you don't have like five or six friends to go to say, will you join me? There might be some other group around that's close to it. But I think that's something I'm needing to do right now is sit down and say, well, this would be my perfect group, would do exactly what I want to do. And then find out, which is the closest to that. And maybe one of the groups I'm already with, and it may not be. That's what I wanted to offer.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. That's what I was saying before with Michelle. And it's really easy. You're an activist, Cheryl. You know how to do it. You've done it many times. You just send out an announcement. You email 20 friends. I'm going to have a meeting on October 4th, the Feast of St. Francis at 7 o'clock for 1 hour to talk about nonviolence. And maybe nonviolence to myself, nonviolence to all others, and being part of the movement. Or you could even use the book. Or we're going to do a gospel study on nonviolence, or the Pace Bene book. Or we're just going to form a nonviolence support community. A local group of friends who want to live nonviolently, and you could just put it out like that. All you need are 3 or 4, and you'll probably get 5 or 10 or 15. And only thing is that you need someone who's going to make sure the meeting happens, and it's at a place. And personally, I think it should meet once a month, and it should only go 1 hour. Meetings like this should not go longer than that, because then people won't keep coming back. Personally, I don't think they should be in people's houses, because then that can turn people away. More people, I don't want to go to so-and-so's house. But if it's in the church, if it's in the schoolroom of the church, then it's really a neutral territory. And churches are open. If you're saying I want to form a St. Francis of Assisi nonviolence group, I doubt your pastor is going to say no. Anyway, I think that's a great idea, Cheryl. I think it's great. Okay, Kelly, if you're still here, wherever you are.
Yes, I'm here. I did want to say something, but every time I go to get a cup of coffee, Tammy pokes something and it raises my hand. But I did want to share.
Good for you. Well, Tammy, do you want to have a question? Do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah. I'm so thankful that we signed up for this today. This really has turned me right side up. I've been too immersed in the news lately, and that's a very dangerous thing to do. When COVID first hit, well, I just graduated from spiritual director training when we went to Assisi, and that's the first time that I met John. And when I came back, I was very centered and very driven to do nonviolence. And by the time that COVID hit, I was very isolated, and I do a self-love writing circle, which is 6 sessions. And when you were talking about how we are to practice love to ourselves and then to the community, after running that for almost 2 years, when I signed on to run it virtually during COVID, I realized it was very self-indulgent for me at the time to stay in that self-love space, that I needed to have matured enough to be able to love others and to be able to hold that space wherever people were. And then leading up to the election, when I saw that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died, I didn't know what to do. So I signed on Facebook and did a Facebook Live, which I've only done a couple of times. I pulled out my handpan and I started playing healing music. And I had a really nice response. And so I did that every night for almost 40 nights in a row with the writing prompts. I read a poem, and then I just played for 15 minutes and invited people to write, and then asked people, this was a practice I was trained in, to do readback lines. No comments, don't comment on anything somebody's written, but if there was a line that somebody wrote that spoke to them, just repeat it. And I did that, and then I started running out of poems, so I used the Beatitudes for the last sessions leading up, and I did the ones in Aramaic, which really had a different verbiage for people. So it didn't trigger anyone's religious, maybe setting or preference. And that was very helpful. And this call today has reminded me how much anger I slipped into, and to really put back in practice, like a chiropractic adjustment, to really put things back in practice. And I'm just really, really glad. So thank you very much for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you for sharing. You did something positive to help people in your story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Thank you for that. I thank you for being honest and sharing how anger seeped back into you. I'm presuming, which is silly, but that it's connected to the first thing you said. You were watching a lot of the news.
That's like a carton of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey. I mean,
what's not to like?
It's like,
Well, you're gonna, if you're having a carton of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey, something's got to give at some point. So if you're watching the news morning, noon, and night, especially under Trump, you're drinking poison.
Yeah,
and Kelly,
have done that, and I can't.
You're a teacher of the spiritual life and peace and healing, by the way, and self-care. And by the way, me too. So look, turn off the TV. I don't have a TV. I don't have news. I look at the New York Times for about a minute or two. That's all I can take. And I come from a newspaper family where I was raised to be a news junkie. But the more I especially under Trump, but even now, I don't pay any attention to that. By the way, I don't pay attention to church news either, because it just makes me angry. I don't believe in reading the NCR, folks, National Catholic Reporter. That's mainly about the bad news. What we need is good news for nonviolence to encourage us. I'm just, as your coach, Kelly, because you're a coach, encouraging you to make some decisions there, and you will feel better. It's noticeable. I mean, as soon as, it's just, I just encourage you. Because you want the anger to go down too. Yeah,
I started doing the examine every night for the last week, and it's caused a shift that's unbelievable, but there's a lot of laundry that I need to do, so this has been very good.
Good. Examine, that's another good practice for self-care and nonviolence to yourself. That's the Ignatian practice of checking in with yourself and with God once or twice a day. And you could just sit down with God or the nonviolent Jesus and go, thank you. And secondly, where did I fail? Thank you for helping me on the journey of love and peace and nonviolence, and help me, where did I misstep today or drop the ball or whatever, and how can I improve that? We're in training. Kelly, we're in permanent formation to be nonviolent revolutionaries. and agents of social transformation for God of peace and universal love. And we want to do better. Ruth Ann, I don't know. Thanks, Kelly. I don't know that anybody else has.
Hey, John.
There's a few things in the chat, but it looks like somebody else wants to
Well,
talk.
why don't you read me one?
Wait. What did, okay. All right, well, here's the thing. One of the things that came up in the chat has to do with how we are to deal with the people that are refusing to be vaccinated. And I know that that's an issue, and talking about the fact that we are all watching the news, we only get a portion of whatever the truth is, etc. And in a personal situation, I have a niece that I'm trying to teach and steer into nonviolence, and she came forth with the fact that she would not agree that vaccination should be mandated. And how do we talk to these people nonviolently in order to help them understand how important this is?
Okay, well, thank you for whoever asked that. And I don't mean to be flippant. Yeah, I don't mean to be flippant. But how do we talk to people like who don't want to wear masks nonviolently? Nonviolently. So by that I mean everything, every moment, every interaction is an opportunity to deepen in nonviolence with everybody, with every human being. How do I put this? We're suffering through this plague, and if the vaccines works, I have friends, and some very well-known friends, who have not been vaccinated and are not going to, and I'm stunned by that. I don't think that I am going to be able to convince them, so I've decided not to talk to them about it, because I know that people are talking to them about it. On the other hand, I just came from the library before I came here, and somebody walked in without wearing a mask. And eventually the librarian went over and he pulled out a mask and put it on, so that was good. I'm not sure how much talking or converting we can do. Remember what Thich Nhat Hanh said, first be solid, second go and try to talk. I don't know if that applies or if you see the method to my madness here. Personally, you do what you can. For me, I can't really go there. I've recently gone to the grocery store several times, and there have been some mean people shouting, I'm not wearing the mask, and so forth and so on. And the store was dealing with it. I haven't been flying, and I don't go out that much. But I support, all the efforts for masks and the vaccination, and I tell people. So again, you do what you can, you be peaceful, you be nonviolent, you pray about it, see what you can do, and things like that. I hope I'm not trying to evade the answer, the question, but if you think that you're going to be able to convince somebody not wearing a mask in a store, I doubt it. There's probably going to be a big argument, and it might be better to leave the store, because this pandemic is real serious. And that means always wearing the masks ourselves. And I could go on and on here, but I'm trying to talk about being as nonviolent as we can to one another during this pandemic. So how about another comment or question, Ruth Ann, or did somebody have a hand up?
Kelly has her hand back up.
Who?
This
Kelly.
is for Tammy. This is
For Tammy. Okay, Tammy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I know
so,
we're coming to the end of our time as well. So, okay, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going back to the vaccine. I'm an adult and geriatric nurse practitioner, and I see patients in nursing homes, assisted living, hospice. And so I've had many, many discussions, because we still have a lot of healthcare providers who do not want to get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
So I've basically, my discussion is very gentle, but I say to the staff who don't want to have a vaccine, because they think it's a new thing, I say, well, the thing is, we're all probably going to get exposed. So when you get COVID, because, these people are less careful, so they're more likely to get it. I said, when you go to the hospital, you understand you're going to have treatments that are not FDA approved. You're getting a bag of, I'm not sure what. You're going to be on a machine and we're going to be trying all kinds of things that we still don't know. So just think about it. And it really has helped people.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tammy. You can also just have a lot of masks and give them to people. I know people who do that.
They are required to wear them, and effective October 1st, they won't have a job if they don't take the vaccine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then there are issues around that we're being forced, that people are being forced to wear a mask. See, that's the other issue that came up about the idea of it being mandated. Should it be, should it not be? Do we respect the opinion of these other people, etc.?
Well, I what is the boundary of nonviolence? What is helping the whole human race live life to the full in peace and nonviolence? You don't kill them. You don't execute them. You don't build nuclear weapons. You don't destroy the planet. And you try not to help spread disease. These are all these pandemics of violence. And don't get too caught up in the media trying to distract us with the keep the Trump people. The issues are much deeper and much as equal to the pandemic. I don't know if this helps what I'm saying, but they're trying to tell us what to do. There's other things going on. And we can only do so much. So just be, as Tammy said, gentle, do what you can within the realm of nonviolence. That would be my thought. I wanted to just ask a few friends here, who haven't seen in a while, if they wanted to say a word. And I'm looking at you, Emily, from New Mexico. And I wanted to see if you wanted to say a word to us.
Hi.
Life.
I feel, I unmuted, right? Yes.
Yeah.
I unfortunately wrote, I got the time wrong. Anyway, I can tell you've had really interesting conversation, and I got a lot from what I just heard when I came in a whole hour late. Hopefully we'll get a recording of this at some point.
Yeah, you'll get the recording soon. Well, nice to see you and welcome. Lexi, any things you want to share with us? Or Jim or Dolores or John and Diane?
I live with someone that presses every button I possess.
Yeah.
And so that first part of taking care of yourself and trying to figure out what not to do to let that button get popped, I really appreciate it. And it's so good to see you. I miss you.
Lexi, that's really wonderful. Boy, wow, you have to take care of yourself so much. You know, I was the coordinator for the Red Cross of all the chaplains. I had 600 chaplains, and they would come to the big center. This was within days after 9/11. And we had a whole thing. The Red Cross was amazing. And I trained people how to train people. We had priests and ministers of every variety. And they would work with these thousands of weeping relatives for 10-hour shifts. But you couldn't leave the building without spending time in a 15-minute small group support group. This is part of the Red Cross thing. And I'm running this for the Red Cross. And Alexi, I remember this big shot priest from the Upper East Side of New York. He was a pastor of a rich church. He wanted to help. But he said, I'm not going to any support group. I don't need help. I'm in charge. I know what I'm doing. So he had been working there all day. He was working 7 days a week at his church. He was going 20 hours a day. And the Red Cross training was you couldn't leave the building without going around the circle and reflecting on what you were doing for yourself today. Now, we're talking about real high-end caregiving here, caregivers, grief counselors, really involved in September 11th. And he and many of them refused to do that. So I removed their security, Lexi. I took their security badge and they were not welcome to minister to people because I didn't want ministers ministering to the grieving who were not, in effect, ministering to themselves or open to being ministered to as well. And so I tell you that story, Lexi, to encourage you to take care of yourself. You're no good to her if you're, you know, and I hope you can take care of yourself. And I wish you a deep bow to you, Lexi, on the journey of peace and nonviolence. Anybody else?
Emily did have something to say.
Emily, you got something to say? Okay.
Yeah,
I know
really,
Emily has something to say.
Really, it's more of a question. I'm a teacher. I've taught my entire, like 21 years I've taught in New Mexico. I recently decided to leave my work in public schools, and I was trained, and I've just started working with an international school whose mission is, it's all about nonviolence and the wisdom traditions of humanity and et cetera. And I'll tell you more about that some other time, John.
Where is it, Emily? Where is it? The one in Las Vegas?
It's international. It's online, but it's called
online. Yeah.
Okay. Enki education, ENKI, Enki contemplative education. Anyway, so there's a lot of a beauty in this approach with the wisdom traditions, like the contemplative side of the world's wisdom traditions. But I've been feeling like a real calling toward, there's just this huge gap, I feel like, for kids, especially teenagers, in the Christian tradition. And I'm just really feeling called to, how does anyone know any people, like, how do I, or we teach teenagers, like I have one in that room, I should probably come out any minute.
I know him. Yeah.
About the you know, the wisdom tradition in Christianity that is nonviolence, that is all of the powerful good stuff. I mean, I don't know, like there doesn't seem to be a curriculum or anything, and but I'm finding it in Enki education for other faiths. It's in there for some for Christianity too. I don't know. Does anyone know anything? Is there anything?
That's a great question. And everything is brand new in all of this nonviolent stuff, including the theology and the spirituality and the churches. And you could see that in the Pope's World Day of Peace message, Emily, he called for that, catechism of nonviolence and so forth. It hasn't really happened, but people are doing it in some places. So for example, there are schools that have the Hands Are for Helping, Not Hurting program. I remember used that in a school I ran once, long ago. There's the best statewide system is out of Rhode Island. And Emily, you should look up Robin Wildman. She works for Bernard Lafayette at the King Center and is a teacher and is trying to get nonviolence taught in every elementary and high school in the state of Rhode Island. And she's creating a model for every school in the United States. She's going out about it as a secular way using Dr. King. We can apply all that, bringing Jesus in every way. And we should be doing, but nobody has done this yet. So maybe, Emily, you need to write it up and start it for us and just put it online for free and let Pax Christi promote it. See, I've known Emily since she was a kid, so she's used to, you can just ignore me as you usually do. Anybody have a quick response to Emily's question, or we'll wrap it up?
I support what you said, John.
Think about writing it yourself, Emily, and I will help you promote it. You know, Pace Bene has a really good program, From Violence to Wholeness, which is the Catholic version. They have an interfaith version, Engaging Nonviolence. And these books have been hugely successful. And we just need a little, you know, how to teach nonviolence in Sunday classes throughout the year. Well, the teachers need to be taught that Jesus was nonviolent, and the priests need to be taught that Jesus was nonviolent. And but anyway, I don't know of anybody doing that. And maybe you might ask Pax Christi to start a group to do that. And let's get it into every church in the country and every school in the country. Yeah, okay. And mindful of the time, and I'm glad to end on Emily's note because I wanted to give a little plug for teaching nonviolence. You all know all about this. I was trying to encourage you as your coach. I'm not sure that any of what I said was helpful because you've heard me say it before, but I encourage you to continue studying nonviolence and to go and be teachers of nonviolence. And I'm very serious about this. Teach your kids' friends about nonviolence. You know, when you're with people saying, hey, you know, I was listening to this Zoom about nonviolence. What do you think about that? It's a great conversation opener. And even with your families, but certainly then with your schools, your jobs, your churches, your priest and your minister, you've got to go up to him or her and talk about nonviolence. They will never start talking about this unless you engage them. Give them books, give them my books. And people who are doing that are making a difference. And that's what I've done every day of my life. I just want to encourage you to be teachers of nonviolence. In effect, I want you to be apostles. An apostle is one who is sent. So I wanted to end with a little blessing and commissioning that we all might go forth as apostles of nonviolence. How would that be? So let's take a moment of prayer. May the God of peace, who loves each one of you infinitely, send you forth as a peacemaker, as an apostle of gospel nonviolence into the world, to teach Jesus's good news of nonviolence, to help heal everyone of violence and lead everyone back onto the path of nonviolence, that we might all follow the nonviolent Jesus into universal love, universal compassion, universal peace, and total nonviolence. So may God bless you and send you forth for the rest of your life to be an instrument of God's peace and universal love, be an apostle of God's gospel nonviolence to our poor world. And I make this blessing in the name of the nonviolent Jesus. Amen. Go have a great day. You've been very good all day so far. You've been very nonviolent. Keep me in your prayers. Keep supporting this little Beatitude Center project. Join us on October 2nd with Jim Lawson and on November 13th with Raj Mohan Gandhi, Gandhi's grandson, who spent the last 3 years of Gandhi's life with Gandhi when he was 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, you want teachers, we got them here, but I need you to each bring about 5 people, okay? Because we don't have many people coming to see this. These are the greatest people I can think of in the world right now on nonviolence. And Mairead McGuire, I'm going to invite her too. Okay, everybody, God bless you. Have a great day. I hope this was okay. Take care, be well. See you next time. Onward. Bye-bye.